where few people looked like me or spoke my language, and the trouble started right away. I had been on campus just a half a semester when I invited my stepbrother Michael to visit me. I called him my stepbrother, but he was really the son of my father's longtime girlfriend. Michael had dropped out of high school, and I hoped that exposing him to college would encourage him to return. In elementary school, he had been a smart kid who made straight A's, wore glasses, and loved to read. The kids at school, in his neighborhood, and even his family had called him a nerd and teased him. I teased him too, but as we got older, I felt bad for him. I knew he was a good guy, and I could see the teasing was really bothering him. His grades fell. He began hanging out with troublemakers and eventually just stopped going to school. He began working out in the gym and transformed his once scrawny frame into muscles and mass. Before long, he was getting into trouble too. He accepted the invitation to visit me at Seton Hall, and he brought one of his cousins and another friend with him. They ran wild on campus all day. About 1 o'clock the next morning, they were still at it, making too much noise in Bowling Hall, the freshman dormitory where I lived. I was afraid they would get us all in trouble, so I confronted Michael in the hall outside my room on the 3rd floor. He accused me of making a big deal out of nothing. My temper blew, and we began arguing loudly, as though we were about to fight. A crowd of students gathered around us, ready to watch some kind of showdown. All of a sudden, I looked up and I saw a bunch of white faces staring at us. I felt ashamed. We were a spectacle, confirming white people's worst stereotypes. Most of my encounters with white people at that point in my life had been negative. White sales clerks followed me through the store on shopping trips through the mall, white police officers stopping and harassing me on the streets of my neighborhood, white passengers holding onto their purses a bit tighter on the train when I passed them. To the average white stranger, I was an instant security threat, a thug, an object to be loathed or feared, not a human being with a heart and dreams and family and fears. I resented this stereotype, but instead of calming myself down, I turned my anger on the crowd. "Why don't y'all get away from here?" I shouted. "We're just having a little disagreement. This ain't nothing for y'all. We ain't no spectacle." The crowd dispersed, all but 2 white guys, who continued to stare. One of them wore an arrogant smirk. "Y'all didn't hear what I said," I yelled. "I said leave." The one with the smirk stood his ground. "Well, we live on this floor too, we pay tuition too, and we don't have to go anywhere." My anger rose another notch. "Did you say?" I asked, feigning disbelief, staring him in his eyes, trying to intimidate him to back down. He repeated himself, full of that righteous white boy attitude. Now my stepbrother and his boys were looking at me as if to say, "Man, this white boy is getting the best of you. What are you going to do?" If I did nothing, I'd look like a punk. I walked over to him and stood chest to chest. "Look, I'm counting to 3. If you don't leave, you're going to wish you had." The white boy chuckled a bit in my face and then turned to his partner. "He's trying to threaten us. Like I really care." I couldn't believe this white boy was disrespecting me. Mind you, he was right. He had as much claim to the hallway space as I had, and I had no business ordering him to his room. But my mind was too filled with anger to accept a rational thought. All I saw was an arrogant white boy trying to put a nigger in his place. I slowly counted to 3. The white boy didn't move. With a strength that belied my small frame, I grabbed him simultaneously by his collar and his crotch, raised him over my head, and dropped him. He slammed to the floor, head first. His neck bent in an odd way, and his body fell limp. Fear replaced my anger. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my heart thumping wildly. I thought I had paralyzed or killed the guy. Suddenly he moved. I exhaled. But with my stepbrother and his boys watching, I couldn't drop my tough guy demeanor. "Now get up," I commanded. The boy was silent. His friend helped him up, and he limped away. I turned and walked past my stepbrother and his boys to my room. I fell on my bed. Sam was out that night, and George was across the hall in his suite. I lay in my room alone, thinking to myself over and over, "Man, what have you done? What have you gotten yourself into now?" About 4 a.m., loud banging on the door of my suite broke my sleep. "South Orange Police," a voice yelled from the other side. They had come for me. I resigned myself to what was sure to happen next. The white boy would press charges against me. I would get kicked out of school, and for what? Because the white boy didn't leave when I told him to leave? I was wrong, and I knew it. I just wasn't thinking about the consequences. On the streets where I grew up, you didn't worry about consequences. If someone disrespected you, you beat his ass, period. From the time I was a little boy, my mother had warned me never to come home crying because I was scared to fight back when someone picked on me. "If you don't beat his ass, don't come home crying," she said. "If you do, I'm going to beat your ass." Either way, you get an ass whooping. So who do you want it from? I opened the door to my suite and followed the officers to a small room downstairs. The dormitory director was there with the boy and his parents. Is this the guy? The officer asked, pointing at me. Yes, that's him, the boy responded. Do you want to press charges? The officer asked, seeming much too eager. The boy didn't respond. His mother looked at me. I expected anger, but there was none. No, we don't want to press charges against him, she said softly. That's okay. I looked at her with eyes that asked, You don't? I figured that's what they had come to do. Maybe she knew I would get kicked out of school if she pressed charges, and she didn't want to ruin my life. I don't know. But now the officer was telling me I was free to go. I wanted to thank her, but I was too shocked to speak. Her decision didn't end the matter, though. Because the incident had occurred on campus, I was summoned to appear before a board of university administrators who would decide my fate. The next day, my two white suite mates approached me. Sam and I had been cordial to them, but we mostly kept our distance. They said they had heard what happened and wanted to know if there was anything they could do to help. One of them said his father was a lawyer and could represent me if I needed. I thanked him for such a kind gesture, but I didn't really need an attorney. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the room, and about a half dozen administrators, mostly white men, sat around a long wooden table. One of them, a priest, with deep blue eyes and white hair, looked particularly sinister. The white boy was there, with his foot in a cast. His foot had slammed to the ground with such force that a bone had snapped. I was sure the administrators, after taking one look at him, would kick me out of school, no matter what I had to say. They called me to testify. I explained what happened and apologized to the guy I had hurt. I truly regretted what I had done. I presented supportive letters from one of my professors and Carla Dixon, who pleaded for mercy on my behalf. The administrators conferred with one another and announced their decision. They would give me another chance. They put me on probation for 6 months. If I got into any more trouble during that time, I would be expelled immediately. Silently, I thanked God. The mother's decision not to press charges against me had likely influenced the board. The compassion she displayed touches me still. It challenged the deep distrust I felt at the time toward white people. How could I continue to feel that way when this mother, who had every right to be angry that I had hurt her son, chose compassion instead? And when the administrators, who would have been justified in kicking me out, chose mercy? And when my suite mates, whom I avoided most of the time, offered their help? I was like, wow, there are some real cool white people in the world. I recognized that I needed to change. If I let my best friends down and blew this opportunity to get a college education, I could blame no one but myself. I prayed to God. Lord, I know I got to get my act together, because sooner or later, you're going to stop looking out for me. I'm glad God is patient, because before the end of my freshman year, I wound up in trouble again. Sam and I were in the room studying one day when some guys I knew stopped by for a visit. They were all dressed in Seton Hall sweatshirts and pants, and they bragged about how easy it was to steal them from the campus bookstore. I knew security in the store was lax, because earlier that year I had stolen a textbook I needed for class. I had run out of money, couldn't call home for help, and was feeling desperate. This time, greed was the motivation. I walked alone to the bookstore in the basement of one of the lecture halls, and went straight to the rack where the sweatshirts were hanging. The store was empty except for the sales clerk behind the counter. There were a bunch of empty hangers and one large sweatshirt left. I scanned the store quickly with my eyes to make sure no one was watching me. Then I slipped the sweatshirt off the rack, stuck it under my shirt, and casually browsed around the store for several minutes. I thought about buying a pen or something cheap to lessen any possible suspicion, but I changed my mind at the last minute. As I passed the front counter on my way out, I felt the eyes of the sales clerk on me. "Excuse me," he said, in the most nasal, annoying tone. "What do you have under your shirt?" "What are you talking about?" I responded, trying to sound offended. "You have to come with me," he said. I couldn't believe this sales clerk, just another student, was challenging me. I took off running. "Hey, come back here," I thought I heard him say. I dashed up the basement steps and toward an open field. I was sure I had gotten away, but when I glanced behind me, I was shocked to see the clerk, a tall guy with long, lanky legs, following my trail. I pumped my legs harder, but I was quickly running out of breath. I made it to President's Hall, the administration building, pulled out the sweatshirt, and stashed it behind some bushes. At least if I got caught, I wouldn't have the stolen merchandise on me. I took off running again toward Bowling Hall. I glanced back, and the clerk was still chasing me. After about 10 minutes of running at full speed, I made it to my dorm. Another student was swiping his identification card to open the electronic doors. I rushed in behind him and ran down the hall to a friend's room. When she opened her door, I burst in and closed the door quickly behind me. "What's wrong?" she asked, startled. I told her I'd tell her later and asked if I could just sit for a while. I was too scared even to talk. Sweat dripped from my face like rain. I sat at my friend's desk, closed my eyes, and cradled my head in my hands. My conscience whipped me. I was still on probation. If the sales clerk found me, I would be kicked out of Seton Hall for sure. I had gambled with my future for a lousy sweatshirt. How could I be so stupid? There would be no more chances. Sam and George would have to go on without me. I kept waiting for the knock on the door. The clerk had chased me this far. I didn't think he would give up until he nabbed me. Surely someone had seen me slip into my friend's room. 45 minutes passed. I sent my friend into the hall to see if anyone was searching for me. Several people told her that a guy from the bookstore had been walking up and down the halls asking residents if they had seen anyone who fit my description, but he was gone. The hall was quiet. I needed some fresh air. I also still wanted that sweatshirt. Part of me felt crazily justified in trying to keep it since I had gone through such trouble to get it. I walked outside and headed back across the field to President's Hall. My stash was gone. The sales clerk must have found it and taken it back to the store. As I walked back to my dorm, I got the feeling that I had just used my last chance. My mind quickly crowded with thoughts. I couldn't keep risking everything. College was different from anything I had ever known, but I could get so much out of it if I just tried. I was making good grades, which meant I was smart enough to be here. All I had to do was stay out of trouble. If I got kicked out of college, where would I go? Back to Mom's house? That would surely break her heart. And what would happen to Sam and George? I thought about my old friends in Plainfield. Of the 10 of us, only 3 of us had even graduated from high school, and I was the only one in college. The walk back to my dorm seemed to take forever, but I was certain I grew up that day. I finally realized that if I wanted to change my life, I had to act differently. I stopped stealing. I worked extra hours. One summer I even got a second job to help buy my books, school supplies, and personal items. Sam, George, and I borrowed from one another. And when that still wasn't enough, I just did without things I needed or wanted. When I told Sam and George what had happened, we laughed it off. Sam never said, "I told you so," though he had chosen to stay in the room when I left for the bookstore. By watching him and George, I began to see that I didn't have to act so tough to be cool, and I tried harder to control my temper. I can't say I was successful right away. I got into more fights, and I blew up more times than I would have liked. But with time and a conscious effort to think about the consequences before I responded, I slowly evolved into a different person. I rarely took time to read anything other than books assigned for class. But at a book sale my freshman year, one provocative title caught my eye: The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. I bought the book. When I read it, I saw myself for the first time. I didn't realize then that the same book had inspired Carla, my college counselor. In it, Jawanza Kunjufu explains that many black boys turn to the streets to learn how to become men because they don't have fathers at home and no one steps in to fill the void. He discusses the importance of reaching black boys before they are hardened by the ways of the street and build a rap sheet the length of a football field. I knew firsthand that he was right, and I immediately wanted to help. All my life, I have been taught that black people have a responsibility to help each other out. I heard it when I followed my uncles to gatherings of the Nation of Islam, and Bill, the owner of the barbershop where I worked as a teenager, preached the same message. Bill owned a small 3-chair shop that sat on Front Street, across from the Anchor Bar, the corner store, and Steve's record shop. He was in his 40s when I worked for him, and he fit the mold of the stereotypical barber, opinionated and quick to dispense advice. He and the other barbers kept the place packed with men of all ages who seemed to enjoy sitting around debating issues of the day as much as getting a haircut. The men engaged in typical barbershop banter about sports, women, and politics. But when the crowd left and Bill and I prepared the shop for closing, I'd sweep up puddles of hair while Bill sat in the chair and pitched questions my way. Why did I think people in the neighborhood were so poor? What could I do to help? What did I think about God? What did the schools teach me about George Washington? Did I know he owned slaves? I was just 13, but Bill pushed me to question things and to think about issues I hadn't considered before. In high school, I even envisioned myself as an activist, but I never saw the dichotomy of that side of myself and the other side that stayed in trouble and did harmful things to people. I didn't think I was a bad person, but I kept doing bad things. When I read Kunjufu's book, I began to see myself more clearly, and I tried harder to change. I've always been a hyper, energetic person, so as soon as I read the book, I immediately wanted to act. I came up with an idea to start a mentoring program for kids in poor neighborhoods. I went to Sam and George. The three of us started brainstorming. We could recruit other volunteers, identify schools in Newark, and become mentors to the students there. We could even sponsor bus trips to bring students to Seton Hall so that they can see a college campus, perhaps for the first time. We wanted to do for children what we knew would have helped us. The three of us approached the Student Government Association, which ordains and finances official campus organizations. But the association was not eager to sanction a new group. The officers said we needed a faculty sponsor and a proposal before they could even consider our idea. They suggested we implement our program through an existing Black organization. Nothing motivates Sam, George, and me more than being told no. We quickly found a sponsor, Professor Forrest Pritchett, the professor who headed the African American Studies Department. Then we sat down together and put our ideas into a proposal. But what would we call our organization? In his book, Kunjufu discusses the principles of Kwanzaa. One of them seemed to fit, Ujamaa, which in Swahili means collective work and responsibility. I suggested it to George and Sam. They loved it. We went back to the SGA. This time, the officers gave in, but they awarded us a measly $500. They said we had to raise whatever else we needed. I have to admit we were pissed. We had grandiose ideas, and we thought just maybe some folks on our campus didn't want a bunch of Black kids from the inner city spending time at the university. That thought motivated us more. We set out to raise some money. During another brainstorm, we came up with a fundraising idea. We could throw a big party in the student union. We were an official campus organization, so we had access to the university's facilities free of charge. Since we always went to other nearby campuses to have fun because few parties at Seton Hall played Black music, we figured we could charge the standard $5, advertise big, and draw students from the colleges and universities we frequented. I don't remember who came up with the theme for the party, but it was perfect, Ujamaa Jam. By then, George, Sam, and I were sophomores. We had never thrown a big party before, but we had been around enough to know that the DJ was the key to success. We needed somebody who knew just what to play and when. One of us remembered that a friend of ours from high school was dating a popular DJ around Newark. We called her, and she helped us book him at a discount rate. Next, Sam, George, and I used a computer to make flyers. Each of us took a bunch and drove to different campuses within an hour's drive, Rutgers, Drew, Fairleigh Dickinson, and others, to spread the news. We walked around handing out flyers to other students and placing them on car windows. We distributed at least 1,000 flyers. The problem with throwing a party like this, though, was that we had no idea until the night of the gig whether it would be a success. That night, 3 of us got there early to meet the DJ. We had asked other volunteers to collect money at the door because we had too many friends we knew would try to get in free if they saw one of us standing there. I watched the door all night, and within the first 2 hours, we had packed the house. After expenses, we cleared several $100s. The party was such a success that we threw another one and sold soda and chips. We chose 2 elementary schools in Newark. George, Sam, and I recruited a few other students and began visiting the schools at the end of the day at least once a week to tutor students and talk to them about college. But when we approached the principals about busing the kids to campus, we got a lukewarm response and ultimately got bogged down in discussions about liability. We were just 19 years old when we planned our organization, so we naively thought that recruiting mentors and bringing kids to campus would be simple. We thought that other students would be knocking on our door to help and that public school officials would bend over backwards to provide kids with this opportunity. We learned really fast that we were wrong. We continued to mentor at the schools we had chosen, but it seemed that one of the biggest components of our organization, bringing kids to campus, had failed. Somehow, though, a teacher from a school in Brooklyn heard about our organization and contacted us. She wanted to bring a group of students from her school to campus. We were eager to work with her. The school itself bused the students to campus and provided chaperones. Ujima bought lunch for all of the students and gave them a tour of the campus, and a few volunteers spoke to them about college life. Just seeing the excitement in the eyes of the kids as they explored the campus made me feel that I was doing something worthwhile. I can't remember ever feeling more proud of myself.
Giving back. Ramik.
I discovered early in my childhood that you don't need money or status to enrich another person's life. Anybody with passion and purpose can do so. Throughout my life, people have given generously of their time, skills, money, and more to help me succeed. They all had busy lives, and they didn't owe me a thing, yet they gave. I've always believed that much is required of those to whom much is given, so I've always felt compelled to give back. George, Sam, and I believe strongly that God protected us and lifted us up so that we could become examples to kids today, especially kids growing up in poor communities. That's why we started the mentoring program called Ujima in our freshman year of college, and more recently, the Three Doctors Foundation. The ways to give are as balanced as your creativity. Maybe you're a nurturer and can mentor a younger or less experienced colleague on the job. Maybe you're good with children and can spend an extra few hours a week reading or tutoring kids at your local elementary school. Or maybe you have the cash to send a kid in your neighborhood to a summer camp or to buy groceries for a poor family during the holidays. Giving is like playing a position on a football team. Everybody can't be the quarterback. You may be a better linebacker, wide receiver, or water boy. The important thing is that you find your position, whatever it is, and play hard. As a teenager, I lacked the one person in my life who could have made a difference earlier. A male mentor, a respectable father figure who would have been willing to spend time with me consistently, giving me advice and sharing fun things to keep me away from bad influences in my neighborhood. I believe that most boys, regardless of who they are or where they live, long for that kind of relationship with a father, a big brother, or even a stranger who steps in to fill the void. And that desire for male guidance stays with us from childhood, when our lives are taking shape, to adulthood, when we are making crucial decisions about careers, life, and family. George always says that people should give, even if they are selfish, because there are selfish reasons to give. Your gift might touch the life of a child who otherwise might end up breaking into your house, jacking your car, or selling drugs to your child. Or your gift might help to raise the brain surgeon who someday saves your life. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but the point is that there's no excuse not to give, even if your reason is a selfish one. But there is another selfish reason to give. When you give to someone else, I found, surprisingly, that you often receive as well. In college, I discovered that when I went to elementary schools to tutor kids, I received as much as, or more than the children did. We live in an age of excess, in which a person's value is attached to how much money he makes, what kind of car he drives, how many things have been acquired. But no monetary value can be placed on the feeling that comes when you know you've made a difference in another person's life. And all of us could use a boost in self-esteem, especially teenage boys, who can often be too macho to admit that they need a good pat on the back. And don't forget, when you touch another person's life, the gift keeps multiplying. Consider George's third-grade teacher. She couldn't have known then that by making a difference in George's life, she someday would also make a difference in Sam's and mine.